A gunshot split the tranquil morning air of Silverstone Creek, sending flocks of birds scattering from the cottonwoods lining the dusty Main Street. Matilda Jenkins didn't flinch, even as the bullet splintered the wooden post just inches from her head. She stood tall on the dry goods store porch, hands planted firmly on her hips. Her green eyes narrowed in determination as she faced the three men who had been terrorizing the town for months. "I said," she repeated, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent street, "that you'll pay a fair price for those supplies or you'll take your business elsewhere, Mr. Curtis." It was 1878, and women in the Wyoming Territory were expected to keep their opinions to themselves. But Matilda, with her 23 years of life experience and a mind sharper than most men's, had never been one to follow such expectations. Her father had raised her to speak her truth after her mother passed during childbirth, and not even the menacing glare of Thaddeus Curtis, the region's most notorious cattle baron, could silence her now. "You hear that, boys?" Curtis sneered, holstering his pistol as he looked at his two cronies. "The shopkeeper's daughter thinks she can dictate terms to me." His weathered face twisted into an ugly smile. "Your pa ought to put a muzzle on you, girl, before that mouth of yours brings real trouble." The crowd that had gathered kept their distance, eyes averted. They all knew what happened to those who crossed Curtis and his men. Just last month, the blacksmith had been found beaten half to death for refusing to shoe Curtis's horses on credit. Matilda didn't waver. "My father is ill, as you well know. I'm running this store now, and I say you'll pay the marked price like everyone else." Curtis spat a stream of tobacco juice near her boots. "Thomas Jenkins owes me. This whole town owes me. I'll take what I want when I want it, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it, Trouble." The nickname had followed Matilda since she'd first stood up to the schoolmaster at 12 years old. Trouble, they called her, the girl who wouldn't be quiet, the woman who didn't know her place. Curtis took a threatening step forward when the sound of approaching hoofbeats drew everyone's attention. A tall figure on horseback rounded the corner, silhouetted against the morning sun. The stranger rode with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to the saddle, his broad shoulders squared beneath a dust-covered coat, a worn Stetson pulled low over his eyes. The horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion, came to a halt at the edge of the confrontation. The stranger surveyed the scene with calm, assessing eyes before dismounting in one fluid motion. He tied his horse to the hitching post with unhurried movements, seemingly oblivious to the tension crackling in the air. "Good morning," he said, his voice deep and even. "Seems I've arrived in town at an interesting time." Curtis turned, irritation flashing across his face at the interruption. "Keep riding, stranger. This doesn't concern you." The newcomer removed his hat, revealing sun-streaked brown hair and a face weathered by years under the open sky. He couldn't have been more than 30, but his eyes spoke of experiences beyond his years. "Name's Owen Reynolds," he said, addressing Matilda rather than Curtis. "Just rode in from Colorado, looking for supplies before heading north." Matilda felt a curious flutter in her chest. "You'll have to wait your turn, Mr. Reynolds. I'm dealing with some pricing disagreements." Owen nodded thoughtfully, his gaze shifting to Curtis and his men. 3 armed men against 1 woman. Hardly seems like a fair disagreement. Curtis's hand twitched near his holster. "I said keep out of it. And the lady said you should pay a fair price," Owen replied, still seemingly relaxed, though Matilda noticed how he'd positioned himself, ready to move at a moment's notice. "Seems reasonable to me." A tense silence fell over the street. Curtis's men exchanged glances, clearly reassessing the situation now that the odds had shifted. "You don't know who you're dealing with," Curtis growled. Owen smiled slightly. "Actually, I believe I do. Thaddeus Curtis, isn't it? Your reputation precedes you." He stepped forward, placing himself between Matilda and the men. But reputations are curious things. They can change in an instant. Something in Owen's tone or perhaps in his steady gaze made Curtis hesitate. He scowled, reaching into his pocket and throwing some coins onto the wooden planks of the porch. "Take your damn money then. Supplies ain't worth the trouble." He turned to Matilda. "This isn't over, girl, not by a long shot." As Curtis and his men mounted their horses and rode away, the townspeople began to disperse, murmuring among themselves. Matilda released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Thank you," she said, bending to collect the scattered coins. "Though I could have handled it." Owen knelt to help her. "I don't doubt that for a second, Miss Jenkins, Matilda Jenkins." Their fingers brushed as she took the last coin from his palm, and she was surprised by the warmth that spread up her arm. "Miss Jenkins," he nodded respectfully. "That was brave, what you did." Standing up to a man like Curtis, she straightened, suddenly aware of the whispers from the remaining onlookers. Others would call it foolish, or worse. "Trouble," came Mrs. Peterson's disapproving voice from across the street. "Always stirring up trouble, that one." Owen's eyes held Matilda's. "Brave," he repeated firmly. "Not trouble." Later that afternoon, as Matilda tended to her father in their small rooms above the store, she couldn't stop thinking about the stranger who had come to her defense. Thomas Jenkins lay on his bed, his once robust frame now frail from the consumption that had taken hold of his lungs over the winter. "Who was that man I heard talking with Curtis?" Thomas asked between labored breaths. Sounded like someone stood up to him for once. Matilda wrung out a cloth in cool water and placed it on her father's forehead. "A stranger passing through, Owen Reynolds. He intervened when Curtis was making threats." Thomas's eyes, still sharp despite his illness, studied his daughter's face. "And you're blushing because—" "I am not," she protested, though she could feel the heat in her cheeks. "He was just different from most men around here. He called me brave instead of trouble." Her father smiled weakly. "You are brave, Tilly, always have been. Your mother would be proud of the woman you've become." He reached for her hand. "But Curtis is dangerous. I worry what he might do now that you've humiliated him in public." "We can't keep letting him take advantage, Pa. He's been bleeding this town dry for years and no one stands up to him." I know," Thomas sighed. "Just promise me you'll be careful." A knock at the door downstairs interrupted their conversation. Matilda squeezed her father's hand. "Rest now. I'll check who that is." She made her way down the narrow staircase to the store, which she'd closed early to tend to her father. Through the front window, she could see Owen Reynolds standing on the porch, hat in hand. Her heart skipped a beat as she smoothed her apron and tucked a loose strand of auburn hair behind her ear before opening the door. "Mr. Reynolds, did you forget something?" He offered a small smile. "Actually, I never got around to purchasing those supplies. I was hoping I might still do so, even though you're closed." Matilda hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. "I suppose I can make an exception. What do you need?" As she helped him gather provisions, coffee, flour, bacon, ammunition for his rifle, they fell into easy conversation. Owen explained he'd been working as a ranch hand in Colorado, but was heading to Montana, where his brother had staked out land for a small horse breeding operation. "You know horses well, then?" Matilda asked as she wrapped his purchases in brown paper. "Better than I know people most days," he admitted. "They're honest creatures, no pretense." Unlike Thaddeus Curtis and his kind, Owen leaned against the counter. "Men like Curtis are the same everywhere. They mistake cruelty for strength and kindness for weakness. The town is afraid of him," Matilda said quietly. "He owns the bank, half the surrounding land, and has the sheriff in his pocket. And yet you stood up to him," she shrugged. "Someone had to." "My father taught me that silence in the face of wrongdoing is its own kind of lie." Owen studied her for a long moment. "Your father sounds like a wise man." "He is, though he's very ill now." She named the total for his purchases, and as he counted out the money, she found herself reluctant for him to leave. "Where are you staying tonight?" "I thought I'd make camp outside town, save my funds for supplies rather than a hotel room." Matilda made a split-second decision. "We have a small guest room. It's nothing fancy, but it's clean and there's a hot meal included. No charge." Owen looked surprised. "That's very generous, but I couldn't impose. It's not an imposition. It's a thank you." She held his gaze steadily. "For being the only person in this town willing to stand beside me today." After a moment's hesitation, Owen nodded. "Then I accept, with gratitude." That evening, the three of them shared a simple but hearty meal of venison stew and cornbread. Despite his illness, Thomas Jenkins was an engaging conversationalist, drawing out Owen's stories of his travels across the Western Territories. Matilda found herself captivated by his descriptions of snow-capped mountains, vast prairies, and the wild herds of mustangs he'd encountered. "And what brings a young woman like you to run a store in a rough town like Silverstone?" Owen asked as Matilda served apple pie for dessert. She exchanged a glance with her father. "I was born here. After my mother died, Pa raised me in this store. I learned to read by cataloging inventory and to count by making change. And to speak her mind by listening to too many of my opinions," Thomas added with a wheezing chuckle. "Pa wanted me to go east for schooling," Matilda continued, "but I couldn't leave him here alone. And truth be told, I love this place, not what it's become under Curtis's influence, but what it could be. A real community." Owen nodded thoughtfully. "Communities need brave people to thrive, people willing to stand for what's right, even when it's difficult." "That's exactly what I've always told her," Thomas said, pride evident in his voice. Later, after Thomas had retired for the night and Matilda had shown Owen to the small guest room, she lingered in the doorway. "Thank you for your kindness to my father," she said softly. "It's been a while since I've seen him so animated." Owen set his saddlebags on the simple bed. "He's a remarkable man. I can see where you get your spirit from. Most would call it stubbornness," she said with a small smile. "Most people are too quick to label women as stubborn when they'd call the same quality determination in a man." He turned to face her fully. "Miss Jenkins, Matilda, I feel I should warn you. Men like Curtis don't forget slights easily. He'll be back." She nodded, her expression somber. "I know. But I can't live in fear of him. None of us should have to." "No, you shouldn't." Owen hesitated, then added, "I was planning to continue my journey tomorrow, but perhaps I'll stay in Silverstone a few more days. Get to know the place." Their eyes met in the soft lamplight, and Matilda felt that curious flutter return to her chest. "I think that would be nice, Mr. Reynolds." "Owen," he corrected gently. "If we're to be friends, you should call me Owen." "Owen," she repeated, liking the way his name felt on her lips. "Then you must call me Matilda." "Good night." "Good night, Matilda," he replied, and the way he said her name as if it were something precious stayed with her long after she'd closed her bedroom door. The next morning, Matilda woke to the sound of hammering. She dressed quickly and went downstairs to find Owen repairing the broken porch post where Curtis's bullet had struck. "You didn't have to do that," she said, bringing him a cup of coffee. He accepted it gratefully. "Seemed the least I could do for your hospitality." He nodded toward the horizon. "Beautiful country around here. I took a ride at dawn to get the lay of the land." "It is beautiful," she agreed. "Though Curtis has been buying up all the water rights, making it harder for the smaller ranchers to survive." Owen frowned. "That explains the abandoned homesteads I passed." Before she could respond, the stagecoach rolled into town, bringing with it the weekly mail and a handful of passengers. Among them was a distinguished-looking gentleman in an expensive suit who immediately headed toward the store. "Miss Jenkins," he called out as he approached. "I've been looking forward to meeting you." Matilda exchanged a puzzled glance with Owen. "I'm afraid you have the advantage, sir." "Forgive me." The man removed his hat. "James Harrington, attorney at law. I've been corresponding with your father regarding the deed to this property." Understanding dawned on Matilda's face. "You're the lawyer from Denver. Please come inside." In the store's back office, Mr. Harrington explained his presence to Matilda and Owen, whom she had asked to join them. "Your father wrote to me concerning Thaddeus Curtis's claim that he holds a loan against this property," Harrington said, opening his briefcase. "I've reviewed the documents, and I believe Curtis has been operating fraudulently. The original loan was paid in full 5 years ago, but he's been collecting interest ever since by threatening foreclosure." Matilda's hands tightened into fists. "I knew it. Pa always insisted he'd paid off the loan, but Curtis kept demanding payments. Unfortunately, this isn't the first time I've encountered such schemes," Harrington continued. "Curtis has been using similar tactics throughout the territory. The governor's office is quite interested in putting a stop to it. So you're saying we don't owe him anything?" Matilda asked, hope rising in her chest. "Not only that, but you may be entitled to compensation for the money he's extorted from you over the years." Harrington pulled out more papers. However, to build a proper case, I need witnesses willing to testify against Curtis. And that's where things become complicated. Owen, who had been listening quietly, spoke up, because people are afraid. Precisely. Harrington nodded grimly. Fear is Curtis's true power, more effective than any legal document. Matilda straightened her shoulders. I'm not afraid. I'll testify. Matilda, Owen said softly, concern evident in his voice. It could be dangerous. More dangerous than letting him continue to strangle this town. She turned to Harrington. What do you need from me? As they discussed the details, none of them noticed the young boy who had been sweeping the store front, listening intently before slipping away to carry the news to Curtis's ranch outside town. That evening, Owen insisted on checking the locks on the store before returning to his room at the small hotel he'd moved to, not wanting to impose further on the Jenkins hospitality. As he walked the darkened streets, he became aware of footsteps behind him. He turned casually, as if checking the night sky, and caught a glimpse of two men following at a distance. Rather than heading directly to the hotel, Owen led his pursuers toward the livery stable where his horse was kept. The stable was dark and quiet as he slipped inside, moving silently between the stalls until he found a position where he could observe the entrance. The two men entered cautiously, one holding a lantern, the other a pistol. Reynolds, one called out. Boss wants a word with you. Owen remained silent, watching as they moved deeper into the stable. Come on out, Cowboy. No need to make this difficult. When they passed his position, Owen stepped out behind them. I'm right here, though I prefer to choose my own company. The men whirled around, but Owen was faster. He disarmed the one with the pistol with a quick, practiced move, then landed a solid punch to the jaw of the second man, sending him sprawling into a pile of hay. The first man rushed him, but Owen sidestepped, using the man's momentum to send him crashing into a support post. Tell Curtis if he wants to talk to me, he can do it in daylight in public, Owen said, keeping the pistol trained on them. And tell him to leave Miss Jenkins alone. She's under my protection now. The men retreated, muttering threats, but Owen paid them no mind. His thoughts were on Matilda and the danger she'd placed herself in by agreeing to testify. He needed to ensure her safety, but he also respected her courage and determination too much to try to dissuade her. As dawn broke the next day, Owen rode out to the Jenkins store early, concerned about Curtis's potential retaliation. He found Matilda already opening up, her face pale but resolved. Someone broke the front window during the night, she told him, sweeping up glass shards. Left this. She handed him a crude note that read simply, Keep your mouth shut or the next thing broken won't be glass. Owen's jaw tightened. You should reconsider testifying. I won't be intimidated, she insisted, though he could see the fear she was trying to hide. This only proves how important it is to stand against him. Before Owen could respond, Thomas Jenkins appeared at the top of the stairs, leaning heavily on the railing, his breathing labored. Pa, you should be resting, Matilda said, hurrying to help him. Thomas waved her concern away. I heard the commotion, Curtis's work. Matilda nodded, supporting her father as he made his way down the stairs. Mr. Harrington thinks we have a strong case against him, Pa. We can finally be free of his threats. Thomas sank into a chair, his face etched with worry. At what cost, Tilly? I've seen what happens to those who cross Curtis. This is different, she insisted. It's legal this time. The governor's office is involved. The law is only as good as those willing to enforce it, Thomas said wearily. And our sheriff isn't exactly known for standing up to Curtis. Owen, who had been thinking deeply, spoke up. What if we could gather more witnesses? Strength in numbers. No one else will speak out, Thomas said, shaking his head. They're all too scared. Perhaps, Owen agreed, but Curtis's influence extends beyond Silverstone. I've heard similar stories from other towns. What if Mr. Harrington could find witnesses from elsewhere? People Curtis can't easily intimidate. Matilda's eyes lit up. That could work. And in the meantime, we continue with business as usual. Show Curtis we won't be cowed. Thomas looked between them, his expression softening as he observed the way they stood together, united in purpose. You two remind me of Matilda's mother and me when we first came to this territory, so full of hope and determination. We'll be careful, Pa, Matilda promised, squeezing his hand. Over the next week, Owen became a fixture at the Jenkins store. While Matilda handled customers and tended to her father, Owen repaired the broken window, reinforced the doors, and kept a watchful eye for Curtis and his men. In the evenings, they would sit on the back porch, watching the sunset and talking late into the night. Matilda found herself drawn to Owen's quiet strength and unwavering moral compass. He listened to her dreams for the town with genuine interest, never dismissing them as fanciful or inappropriate for a woman, as so many others had done. "I want to open a proper school," she told him one evening. "Children here get only the most basic education before they're put to work. They deserve more." "You'd make an excellent teacher," Owen observed, his eyes warm in the fading light. "You have patience and passion, the two most important qualities." "And what about you?" she asked. "Will you be content breeding horses in Montana?" He gazed at the distant mountains. "I've been wandering for so long, I'm not sure I know how to stay in one place anymore. After my wife died in childbirth 5 years ago along with our son, the idea of home became complicated." Matilda's heart ached for his loss. "I'm so sorry, Owen," he nodded, his expression distant. "Caroline was strong like you, unafraid to speak her mind." He looked at her then, something unreadable in his eyes. "Meeting you has reminded me that there might still be a future worth building." The moment hung between them, charged with possibility, until they were interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. Owen was on his feet instantly, hand moving to the pistol at his hip as 5 riders appeared in the gathering dusk. Curtis led the group, his face a mask of contempt as he reined in his horse. "Well, isn't this cozy, the troublemaker and her pet cowboy?" "State your business, Curtis," Owen said evenly, positioning himself slightly in front of Matilda. "My business," Curtis laughed coldly. "This whole town is my business, Reynolds, including this store and the woman who thinks she can destroy what I've built." Matilda stepped forward, refusing to be protected. "What you've built is a house of cards based on fraud and intimidation. It's time someone blew it down." Curtis's expression darkened. "I came to offer you a chance, Jenkins. Drop this nonsense with Harrington and I'll forget about the disrespect. Hell, I might even forgive the back payments your father forgot to make." "There are no back payments," Matilda retorted. "The loan was paid in full years ago and you know it." "Brave words," Curtis sneered. "But bravery won't stop me from taking this store when your father dies, which, judging by the look of him, won't be long now." Owen's hand tightened on his gun. "That's enough, Curtis, or what, cowboy?" "You'll shoot me, in front of witnesses," Curtis gestured to his men. "You'd hang before sunrise." "No one's shooting anyone," came a new voice as James Harrington emerged from the shadows of the store. "Though I'm very interested in hearing more about these threats you're making, Mr. Curtis." "They'll make excellent testimony for the territorial court." Curtis's face contorted with rage. "You're playing a dangerous game, lawyer." "On the contrary," Harrington replied calmly, "I'm simply upholding the law." A concept you might want to familiarize yourself with before your hearing next month. For a tense moment, it seemed Curtis might order his men to attack, but instead he jerked his horse's reins sharply. "This isn't over," he spat before riding away, his men following close behind. Later, after Harrington had left and Thomas had gone to bed, Matilda found Owen standing guard on the front porch, his eyes scanning the darkness. "You should get some rest," she said softly, joining him. "Curtis won't be back tonight." "Perhaps not," Owen agreed, "but I'll feel better knowing someone's keeping watch." She studied his profile in the moonlight. "You don't have to stay, you know, in Silverstone. This isn't your fight." He turned to her, his gaze intense. "What if I want it to be? What about Montana?" "Your brother's ranch. Some things are worth changing plans for." He reached out, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Some people, too." Matilda's heart raced at his touch. Owen, the crack of a rifle shot cut off her words as a bullet splintered the wood near their heads. Owen tackled her to the ground, covering her body with his as more shots rang out. "Are you hit?" he demanded, his voice tight with fear. "No," she gasped. "You? I'm fine. Stay down." He drew his pistol, raising himself slightly to peer into the darkness. The street was empty, but smoke curled from the alley across the way. "Shooters in the alley. We need to get inside." With Owen providing covering fire, they scrambled back into the store, bolting the door behind them. Thomas was already up, his old rifle in his trembling hands. "Curtis?" he asked grimly. "Has to be," Matilda confirmed, her voice steadier than she felt. "But shooting at us in town, he's getting desperate." Owen checked his ammunition. "Desperate men are the most dangerous kind." As if to prove his point, the front window shattered as a flaming bottle crashed through, immediately setting fire to the dry goods display. Matilda grabbed a blanket to smother the flames while Owen rushed to the window, firing at shadowy figures retreating down the street. "We need to get out of here," Owen said urgently. "They're trying to burn us out." Thomas coughed violently as smoke began to fill the room. "Go," he wheezed. "Take Matilda and go." "We're not leaving you, Pa," Matilda insisted, supporting him as they moved toward the back door. Outside, they could hear shouting as townspeople began to respond to the fire. Owen led them through the back garden toward the stable where they kept a wagon and 2 draft horses. "Head for the Wilson place," Thomas suggested between labored breaths. "John Wilson's no friend of Curtis. He'll take us in." As Owen helped Thomas into the wagon, Matilda ran back toward the store. "The deed," she called over her shoulder. "And Pa's medicine." "Matilda, wait," Owen shouted, but she had already disappeared inside the smoke-filled building. Heart pounding, Owen secured Thomas in the wagon and raced after her. Inside, the fire had spread to the staircase, and thick smoke made it nearly impossible to see. He found Matilda in the back office, clutching a metal box and a small bag. "Come on," he urged, grabbing her arm. "The whole place is going up." They stumbled outside just as the upper floor collapsed in a shower of sparks and burning timber. Owen lifted Matilda into the wagon beside her father, then took the reins and urged the horses into a gallop, away from the burning store and the town that had turned its back on the Jenkins family for too long. At the Wilson Ranch, 10 miles outside Silverstone, they found refuge. John Wilson, a grizzled old rancher who had his own grievances with Curtis, welcomed them without question. His wife, Martha, tended to Thomas, whose condition had worsened from the smoke and exertion. As dawn broke, Matilda sat beside her father's bed, holding his hand as he slept fitfully. Owen entered quietly, carrying a cup of coffee for her. "Any change?" he asked softly. She shook her head, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Martha says the next few hours will tell." She looked up at him, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. "We've lost everything, Owen, the store, our home." He sat beside her, taking her free hand in his. "Not everything. You have your father, you have the deed proving the property is rightfully yours." And he hesitated, then continued, "You have me if you want me." Matilda's eyes widened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I came to Silverstone looking for supplies and found something I wasn't even searching for." He squeezed her hand gently. "You called yourself trouble. Others did too. But from the moment I saw you standing up to Curtis, all I saw was courage. All I saw was a woman I could love." "Love," she whispered, hardly daring to believe. "Love," he confirmed. "I know it's sudden and there's so much uncertainty right now, but I've learned that life is too short to waste time when you find someone who makes your heart feel whole again." Tears filled Matilda's eyes. "I thought I was alone in this fight, that no one would ever see me as anything but trouble." "You're not trouble, Matilda Jenkins. You're the bravest woman I've ever known." He leaned forward, brushing his lips against hers in a tender kiss that promised both comfort and passion. "And I'd be honored to stand beside you, whatever comes next." From the bed, Thomas's weak voice interrupted them. "About time," he murmured, a ghost of a smile on his pale face. "Been watching you two dance around each other for days." "Pa," Matilda exclaimed, turning to him with relief. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been trampled by a herd of buffalo," he admitted. "But seeing my daughter finally find a man worthy of her makes it a bit more bearable." Owen cleared his throat, suddenly looking nervous. "Mr. Jenkins, I know this isn't the proper way to go about things, but I'd like your blessing to court your daughter, and if she'll have me, to marry her when the time is right." Thomas studied Owen for a long moment, then nodded. "You stood by her when no one else would." "That tells me all I need to know about your character." He looked at Matilda. "But it's her decision, not mine." All eyes turned to Matilda, who felt a strange calm settle over her despite the chaos of the past hours. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes to courting." Yes to whatever future we build together. The next month brought dramatic changes to Silverstone Creek. With testimony from Matilda, Owen, and witnesses Harrington had gathered from neighboring towns, Thaddeus Curtis was arrested on multiple charges of fraud, extortion, and arson. Without his protection, his men quickly scattered, unwilling to face justice themselves. The townspeople, freed from Curtis's grip, rallied around the Jenkins family. Led by John Wilson and the blacksmith, they organized a barn-raising-style effort to rebuild the store, bigger and better than before. This time with a proper schoolroom attached, where Matilda could realize her dream of educating the town's children. Thomas Jenkins, though still frail, seemed to gain strength from the community's support and the happiness he saw in his daughter's eyes whenever she looked at Owen. On a crisp autumn day, 6 months after the fire, Matilda stood in the newly completed store, arranging supplies on freshly built shelves. Owen entered, hanging his hat on the peg by the door, a gesture that had become comfortingly familiar. "Mail's in," he announced, handing her several letters, including one from Harrington. Matilda quickly opened it, her eyes scanning the contents. "Curtis has been sentenced to 15 years in the territorial prison," she read aloud, "and the governor has approved compensation for all those who were defrauded." Owen smiled, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Justice at last. It wouldn't have happened without you," she said, turning in his embrace to face him. "You gave me strength when I needed it most." "You always had the strength, Matilda. I just reminded you of it." He kissed her forehead. "How's your father today?" "Better. The doctor says he might even be well enough to give me away at our wedding next month." Owen's expression grew serious. "Are you sure you're ready? We could wait longer if you need more time." Matilda shook her head firmly. "I've never been more certain of anything. This town is healing. My father is recovering, and I love you, Owen Reynolds. I don't want to wait another day longer than necessary to become your wife. I love you too, Matilda Jenkins, soon to be Reynolds." He pulled a small box from his pocket. "Which reminds me, I have something for you." Inside was a simple gold band, etched with a pattern of small stars. "It was my mother's," Owen explained. "She always said the right woman would come along for me to give it to. She was right." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Matilda felt tears of joy well in her eyes. "From trouble to bride," she mused. "Who would have thought?" "I did," came Thomas's voice from the doorway, where he stood leaning on his cane. "The moment I saw how he looked at you. Not as trouble, but as the treasure you are." Owen smiled, drawing Matilda close to his side. "The day I rode into Silverstone and saw you standing up to Curtis, I knew you were someone special. They called you trouble for speaking up. I called you brave and decided right then to make you mine." "And I am," Matilda whispered, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "Now and always." In the years that followed, Silverstone Creek flourished under the guidance of Owen and Matilda Reynolds. The store expanded, the school thrived, and their home above the shop filled with the laughter of 3 children who inherited their mother's courage and their father's steadfast heart. Thomas Jenkins lived to see his first 2 grandchildren born, often telling them the story of how their brave mother and heroic father had saved not just each other, but an entire town. And whenever anyone new arrived in Silverstone and heard whispers of the woman who had once been called Trouble, they would quickly be corrected. "That's Matilda Reynolds," the townspeople would say with pride, "the bravest woman in the territory and the heart of our community." As for Owen and Matilda, they never tired of recounting to their children how love had found them in the most unexpected circumstances, how a chance meeting on a dusty street had changed not only their lives but the fate of a town. And every anniversary, Owen would whisper the same words that had first brought them together. "Not trouble, brave, always brave."